Have you ever felt like a man was pulling away from you, even though you thought you were doing everything right? Maybe he stopped making an effort, started taking you for granted, or worse, began treating you with less respect than when you first met. If you're nodding your head right now, you're not alone. And more importantly, it's probably not what you think. The truth is, earning respect in relationships has nothing to do with your age, your looks, or how much you give to someone. It's entirely about behavior. And unfortunately, many mature women unknowingly fall into specific patterns that make men lose interest and, even worse, lose respect. Here's what's really happening. Once respect is gone, love starts to fade too. It's like watching a beautiful garden slowly wither because the soil has become toxic, even though the gardener keeps watering it with good intentions. But here's the empowering truth. These are just habits, and habits can be changed. Today, I'm going to share with you 7 specific behaviors that research shows make men lose respect for older women. These aren't my opinions or vague relationship theories. These are backed by real studies, relationship experts, and behavioral psychology. More importantly, they're patterns you can recognize and stop today. Some of what I'm about to share might sting a little. You might see yourself in these habits. But remember, awareness is the first step to transformation. By the end of this video, you'll have a roadmap to show up differently in your relationships, command the respect you deserve, and attract the kind of love that honors who you truly are. So if you're ready to stop these respect-killing habits and start building relationships based on mutual admiration and genuine connection, let's dive in. Habit number 1, always putting his needs first. Let's start with the most common pattern I see, and honestly, the most heartbreaking one. Always putting his needs first at your own expense. Picture this scenario. Sarah, a 52-year-old teacher, meets David through a dating app. In the beginning, she's excited to show him how caring she is. She cooks his favorite meals, even though she prefers healthier options. She cancels her book club to watch his football games. She adjusts her sleep schedule to match his late-night calls. She thinks she's being loving and supportive. But here's what actually happens in David's mind. At first, he feels grateful and appreciates her thoughtfulness. But as weeks turn to months, something shifts. Her constant accommodation doesn't feel like love anymore. It feels like she doesn't have a life of her own. Worse, it starts to feel like she doesn't value herself. This isn't just one woman's story. This is a pattern I've seen repeated countless times, and there's actual research behind why it backfires. A groundbreaking study published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships tracked couples over several years and found something fascinating. When one partner consistently gives more in a relationship, the other partner doesn't feel more loved. They start taking it for granted. Not because they're cruel or ungrateful, but because human beings naturally adapt to their environment. Think about it this way. If someone always says yes to you, their yes becomes meaningless. If someone never has their own plans, being included in yours doesn't feel special. If someone constantly accommodates you, you start to expect accommodation instead of appreciating it. Dr. Patricia Evans, author of The Verbally Abusive Relationship, explains that when women consistently prioritize their partner's needs over their own, they're actually teaching that partner that their needs don't matter. It's an unconscious lesson, but it's powerful. Here's the psychology behind it. Respect is built on the foundation of self-respect. When a man sees that you don't prioritize your own well-being, your own interests, your own boundaries, he unconsciously starts to deprioritize them too. It's not malicious, it's just human nature. Now, I'm not saying you should become selfish or stop being caring. Caring is beautiful. Thoughtfulness is a gift. But there's a crucial difference between generous love and self-sacrificial love. Generous love comes from abundance. You give because you want to, because you have plenty to give. Self-sacrificial love comes from scarcity. You give because you think it's the only way to earn or keep love. So what does healthy prioritization look like? It means saying, "I'd love to cook dinner for you, but Tuesday is my yoga night." It means, "I enjoy spending time with you, but I also have plans with my girlfriends this weekend." It means maintaining your own interests, your own schedule, your own non-negotiables. When you do this, something magical happens. A quality man doesn't feel rejected. He feels intrigued. He starts to see you as a whole person with your own rich life, not as someone whose world revolves around him. He begins to work to earn time in your world instead of expecting you to revolve around his. Remember, boundaries aren't barriers to love. They're the foundation for mutual respect. When you show a man that you value yourself, you teach him to value you too. Habit number 2, seeking constant reassurance. The second habit that kills respect is one that comes from a very human place, seeking constant reassurance about your worth, your attractiveness, or your place in his life. Let me paint you a picture. Linda, 48, has been dating Mark for 6 months. She finds herself asking questions like, "Do you still find me attractive? Are you getting bored with me? You're not thinking about other women, are you?" She asks these questions because she genuinely wants to feel secure and loved. But here's the painful irony. The more she asks for reassurance, the less reassured Mark feels about their relationship. And more importantly, the less respect he has for her emotional strength. Let's understand why this happens. Everyone needs validation. That's completely normal and healthy. But there's a world of difference between occasional check-ins and constant emotional polling. When reassurance seeking becomes a pattern, it sends several problematic messages. First, it suggests you don't trust his feelings or his words. If he's told you he cares about you, but you keep asking if he still does, you're essentially saying his previous answers weren't good enough or believable enough. Second, it positions you as emotionally fragile. Men, especially mature men, are attracted to emotional stability. They want a partner who can weather life's ups and downs without needing constant emotional caretaking. Dr. Stan Tatkin, a couples therapist and author of Wired for Love, has studied this pattern extensively. He found that when one partner becomes the other's primary source of emotional regulation and validation, it creates what he calls emotional fatigue. The relationship starts to feel like work instead of joy. Here's what happens in the brain. Every time you ask for reassurance, you're essentially asking your partner to manage your anxiety. At first, most men will gladly do this because they care about you, but over time, it becomes exhausting. They start to feel more like your therapist than your boyfriend. Even worse, constant reassurance seeking often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you question his feelings, the more he starts to question them too. Your insecurity actually plants seeds of doubt where none existed before. I want to share something important. Needing reassurance doesn't make you weak or broken. Many of us, especially if we've been hurt in past relationships, develop this pattern as a survival mechanism. We think that if we can just get enough confirmation, we'll finally feel safe. But here's the truth. Real security comes from within. It comes from knowing your own worth so deeply that you don't need constant external validation to feel valuable. So how do you break this pattern? Start by becoming your own source of reassurance. When you catch yourself wanting to ask, "Do you still like me?" Ask yourself instead, "Do I still like me?" Focus on the evidence of his care through his actions, not just his words. If he's choosing to spend time with you, if he's introducing you to his friends, if he's making plans for the future, these are much stronger indicators than verbal reassurances. Create a list of your own amazing qualities and read it when you feel insecure. Build a life so rich and fulfilling that your sense of worth doesn't depend entirely on one person's opinion of you. When you stop seeking constant reassurance, you project confidence. And confidence, especially in a mature woman who's lived life and learned from it, is incredibly attractive. Men respect women who are secure in themselves because it allows them to relax and just enjoy the relationship instead of constantly managing someone else's emotional needs. Habit number 3. Over-accommodating his lifestyle. Now let's talk about habit. Number 3. Over-accommodating his lifestyle to the point where you lose yourself in the process. This one is sneaky because it feels like bonding at first. Meet Carol, a 55-year-old artist. She starts dating James, who's passionate about hiking and craft beer. Soon, Carol finds herself researching hiking trails she's never been interested in, downloading beer rating apps, and slowly molding her weekends around his outdoor adventures. At first, James is flattered. He thinks it's sweet that she's taking interest in his hobbies. But as months pass, something shifts. He starts to miss the artistic, creative woman he first met. He wonders what happened to her gallery openings, her pottery classes, her quirky sense of humor that had nothing to do with his interests. Here's what Carol doesn't realize. By becoming a reflection of James, instead of remaining herself, she's actually becoming less attractive to him, not more. This pattern is incredibly common among women who've been taught that adaptation equals love. We think that if we can just become the perfect complement to his life, he'll never want to leave. But this strategy backfires spectacularly. A 2021 relationship survey by eHarmony, involving over 2,000 participants, found something fascinating. Both men and women reported feeling less attracted to partners who lost their individuality over time. The participants described feeling like they were dating a mirror instead of a person. Here's the psychology. Attraction is built on intrigue, mystery, and complementary differences. When you abandon your own interests to adopt his, you're not creating harmony. You're creating redundancy. Why would he need two of him in the relationship? Dr. Esther Perel, renowned relationship expert, explains this beautifully in her work on desire and attraction. She says that we need both connection and separateness for a relationship to thrive. When one person completely adapts to the other, you lose the creative tension that keeps relationships alive and exciting. Think about it this way. Imagine you love Italian food and your partner decides to give up all other cuisines to only eat Italian with you. At first, you might think it's romantic, but after a while, wouldn't you start to wonder what happened to their own tastes? Wouldn't you miss the excitement of trying new things together? Over-accommodation sends a deeper, more troubling message. I don't think I'm interesting enough as I am. This is particularly heartbreaking for mature women because you have decades of experiences, wisdom, and developed interests that make you fascinating. When you abandon all of that to become his echo, you're hiding your greatest assets. Let me tell you what real compatibility looks like. It's not about becoming the same person. It's about being two whole, interesting people who choose to share a life together. It's about saying, I love that you're passionate about hiking, and I'd love to try it occasionally. I'm also passionate about art, and I'd love to share that world with you sometimes. The most attractive thing you can say to a man isn't, I love everything you love. It's, I love who you are, and I want you to meet who I am. Here's your action step. Make a list of the interests, hobbies, and activities that made you feel most like yourself before this relationship. Which ones have you abandoned or neglected? Pick one and recommit to it this week. Invite him to join you sometimes, but don't make it about him. Make it about honoring the complete, fascinating woman you are. When you maintain your own identity, you give him something to discover about you constantly. You remain interesting. You remain mysterious. You remain worthy of respect because you respect your own uniqueness enough to preserve it. Habit number 4, tolerating poor behavior to keep the peace. The fourth habit that erodes respect is one that many mature women fall into after experiencing difficult relationships, tolerating poor behavior in order to keep the peace. Let me introduce you to Janet, a 50-year-old executive who's been through a difficult divorce. She meets Robert, and when he makes sarcastic comments about her career or dismisses her opinions during dinner with friends, she tells herself, "He's just having a bad day," or "It's not worth making a scene." Janet thinks she's being mature and understanding. She thinks she's avoiding drama. But what she's actually doing is teaching Robert that her boundaries are negotiable, that her dignity is optional, and that there are no consequences for treating her poorly. This is one of the most dangerous patterns because it escalates over time. Poor behavior that goes unchallenged doesn't disappear, it grows bolder. Dr. Harriet Lerner, in her groundbreaking book, The Dance of Anger, explains that when we consistently avoid conflict to keep peace, we actually create bigger conflicts down the road. More importantly, we create power imbalances that destroy mutual respect. Here's what happens psychologically. When you repeatedly let someone cross your boundaries without consequences, they unconsciously start to believe you don't have any boundaries. They begin to see you as someone who will accept anything, and unfortunately, that's not a quality that inspires respect. It's a quality that invites more poor treatment. Let me be clear about something. I'm not talking about major character, flaws, or abusive behavior. That requires a completely different response, often involving professional help or leaving the relationship entirely. I'm talking about the everyday disrespects that chip away at your dignity: chronic lateness without apology, dismissive comments, emotional coldness after arguments, taking you for granted, or treating you like you're less important than other. Priorities in his life. The mature woman's dilemma is real. You've been through enough drama in your life. You know that some battles aren't worth fighting. You've learned to pick your battles wisely. But there's a crucial difference between choosing not to react to every small annoyance and accepting treatment that crosses your fundamental boundaries. Here's the key distinction. Boundaries aren't about controlling someone else's behavior. They're about controlling your own response to their behavior. A boundary sounds like this: when you speak to me sarcastically, I'm going to leave the room. Or, if you're going to be consistently late without calling, I'll make other plans. Notice that you're not trying to force him to change. You're simply stating what you will and won't accept, and what your response will be if your boundaries are crossed. Why does this actually increase respect instead of creating conflict? Because it shows that you value yourself. It demonstrates that you have standards. It proves that you're not desperate to keep him at any cost. All of these qualities are attractive to emotionally healthy men. Think about the people in your life whom you respect most. Are they people who accept poor treatment silently, or are they people who calmly but firmly communicate their standards? We respect people who respect themselves. The most powerful thing you can do when someone treats you poorly isn't to yell, argue, or try to change them. It's to calmly state your boundary and follow through with your consequence. That tone doesn't work for me. I'm going to take some space, and we can continue this conversation when we can speak respectfully to each other. Here's what often happens when you start setting boundaries after a period of accepting poor treatment. The behavior might get worse before it gets better. This is called an extinction burst in psychology. When someone is used to getting away with something and you suddenly change the rules, they often escalate their behavior to test whether you're serious. This is the crucial moment. If you hold your boundary firmly and consistently, one of two things will happen. Either they'll learn to respect your limits and the relationship will improve, or they'll show you that they're not capable of treating you with respect, and you'll have valuable information about whether this is the right relationship for you. Either outcome is better than slowly losing yourself by accepting treatment that diminishes your dignity. Habit number 5. Downplaying your standards because you think you're too old to be picky. Habit number 5 breaks my heart every time I encounter it. Downplaying your standards because you think you're too old to be choosy. I hear women say things like, "At my age, I can't be too picky," or "There aren't many good men left, so I should be grateful for what I can get," or "I'm not in a position to have high expectations anymore." Let me tell you something right now. This mindset is relationship poison, and it's based on a fundamental lie about your worth. Meet Diana, 53, who's been single for 3 years after her divorce. She meets Tom on a dating app, and while he only calls her when it's convenient for him, rarely makes solid plans in advance, and seems more interested in physical intimacy than emotional connection, she tells herself she should be grateful. At least he's interested, she thinks. At least I'm not alone. But here's what Diana doesn't realize. Her willingness to accept crumbs is actually teaching Tom that crumbs are all she's worth. And men, consciously or unconsciously, treat you according to the standards you set for yourself. This was confirmed by a fascinating 2022 study featured in Psychology Today, where researchers interviewed men about what made them lose interest during dating. One of the most common responses was, "When she acted like she was lucky to have me instead of the other way around." Think about that for a moment. Men are actually turned off when women act grateful just for their basic attention. Why? Because it suggests you don't value yourself highly. And if you don't value yourself highly, why should they? Here's the truth, that our youth-obsessed culture doesn't want you to know. Your age is not a liability, it's an asset. You bring things to a relationship that younger women cannot: emotional wisdom, life experience, self-knowledge, financial stability, and the confidence that comes from having survived and thrived through decades of life. You know what you want and what you don't want. You've learned from your mistakes. You're not looking for someone to complete you. You're looking for someone to complement the already complete person you've become. These are incredibly valuable qualities in the relationship marketplace. But when you operate from scarcity, when you believe there aren't enough good men or that you're running out of time, you make decisions from fear instead of wisdom. You settle for treatment that your younger self would never have accepted, not because it's appropriate, but because you're afraid it might be your last chance. Let me share something that might shock you. In my work with relationship coaches and dating experts, I've learned that men in their 50s, 60s, and beyond are often specifically looking for mature women. They want someone who's done the work of figuring out who they are. They're tired of drama, games, and emotional immaturity. They want partnership, not project management. But here's the catch. They want mature women who know their own worth. They're not looking for someone who's grateful for basic respect and attention. They want someone who expects quality treatment because they know they deserve it. Your standards shouldn't lower with age. They should crystallize. You should know exactly what kind of treatment, communication, and commitment you're willing to accept because you've learned what works and what doesn't. High standards don't mean you're looking for perfection. They mean you're looking for compatibility, respect, emotional availability, and genuine interest in building something meaningful together. These aren't unrealistic expectations. They're basic requirements for healthy relationships at any age. Here's your homework. Write down your non-negotiables. What kind of communication do you need? How often do you want to hear from someone you're dating? What does respect look like to you? What are your deal breakers? Then commit to honoring these standards, not because you're being picky, but because you're being wise. When you raise your standards, something beautiful happens. You attract people who are capable of meeting them. You repel people who aren't. This isn't a bug, it's a feature. You want to filter out people who can't meet your basic requirements for healthy relationship. Remember, settling doesn't protect you from heartbreak. It guarantees it. The heartbreak of being alone is temporary and manageable. The heartbreak of being with someone who doesn't value you is chronic and soul-crushing. Habit number 6. Talking too much about past relationships. Habit number 6 is something many of us do, without realizing how damaging it can be. Talking too much about past relationships, especially negative experiences with ex-partners. Picture this. Margaret, 49, is on her third date with Paul. The conversation flows naturally until Margaret mentions how her ex-husband never helped with housework. Later, when Paul suggests a weekend getaway, Margaret shares how her previous boyfriend made similar promises but never followed through. When Paul compliments her, she deflects by saying her ex rarely said nice things about her appearance. Margaret isn't trying to be negative. She's sharing her experiences, processing her past, and maybe even trying to communicate her needs indirectly. But from Paul's perspective, something else is happening. He's starting to feel like he's competing with ghosts, or worse, like he's being interviewed for a position based on how different he is from her exes. Dr. Michelle Weiner Davis, a marriage and family therapist, conducted extensive interviews with divorced men and women about dating deal breakers. One of the most consistent complaints from men was feeling like they were constantly being compared to previous partners or being used as emotional dumping grounds for unresolved relationship trauma. Here's what happens psychologically when you frequently reference past relationships. First, it signals that you're not emotionally available for something new. If you're still processing, analyzing, or reacting to past relationships, you're not fully present for the current one. Second, it makes your new partner feel like they're auditioning for a role rather than getting to know you as a person. Every time you say, "my ex used to," or "men always," you're essentially saying, "here's how I expect you to disappoint me based on my previous experiences." Third, and perhaps most importantly, it suggests that you haven't done the emotional work to close those chapters of your life. Emotional unavailability isn't attractive at any age, but it's particularly problematic for mature women because men assume we've had time to process our past experiences. Now, I want to be clear. Having a past isn't the problem. We all have histories, and healthy relationships require some level of sharing about where we've been and what we've learned. The issue is when past relationships become a frequent reference point or when you're clearly still emotionally reactive to previous experiences. Here's the difference between healthy sharing and problematic patterns. Healthy sharing sounds like, "I've learned that good communication is really important to me in relationships." Problematic sharing sounds like, "My ex never listened to me, so I really need you to hear what I'm saying." Healthy sharing sounds like, "I value independence and partnership in relationships." Problematic sharing sounds like, "My ex was so controlling, so I need to make sure you're not going to be like that." Do you see the difference? In healthy sharing, you're communicating your values and preferences. In problematic sharing, you're still emotionally entangled with your past and projecting those experiences onto your new partner. Men want to feel like they're building something new with you, not trying to repair damage from your previous relationships. They want to be chosen for who they are, not for how different they are from someone who hurt you. Here's how to shift this pattern. Before you share something about a past relationship, ask yourself why you're sharing it. Are you trying to communicate a current need or preference? Then find a way to express that without referencing your ex. Are you still processing hurt or anger from the past? Then that's work to do with a therapist or trusted friend, not with your new romantic interest. Focus on what you're building together, not on what you're trying to avoid based on past experiences. Talk about your hopes and dreams for this relationship, not your fears based on previous ones. When you stop living in the past, you free yourself to be fully present for whatever beautiful possibility is standing right in front of you. And that presence, that emotional availability, is incredibly attractive to men who are serious about building something meaningful. Habit number 7. Giving more than you receive consistently. The seventh and final habit that kills respect is perhaps the most heartbreaking because it comes from such a loving place. Consistently giving more than you receive in the relationship. This might look like always being the one to reach out first, constantly offering help and support while rarely asking for or receiving the same, giving thoughtful gifts while receiving little in return, or always being available when he needs you while he's frequently too busy when you need him. Meet Susan, a 51-year-old nurse who prides herself on being caring and generous. She's dating Michael, and she finds herself always being the one to suggest dates, always offering to help when he's stressed with work, always checking in on his day. When Michael seems distant, she doubles down on giving, thinking that more love and attention will bring him closer. But the opposite happens. The more Susan gives, the more Michael seems to pull away. The more available she makes herself, the less effort he puts in. Susan is confused and hurt, but she's caught in what psychologists call the anxious avoidant trap. Dr. Amir Levine and Rachel Heller, authors of the groundbreaking book Attached, explain this pattern perfectly. When one person consistently overgives in a relationship, it often triggers avoidant behavior in their partner. The overgiver becomes more anxious and gives more, while the receiver becomes more avoidant and gives less. It's a devastating cycle that destroys relationships. Here's what's happening psychologically. When you consistently give more than you receive, you're inadvertently teaching the other person that they don't need to reciprocate. You're showing them that you'll do all the emotional labor, all the relationship maintenance, all the care and attention. They start to rely on your overgiving instead of developing their own capacity to contribute. Even worse, overgiving often comes from a place of unconscious neediness or fear. You give excessively because you're afraid that if you don't, they might leave. You think that your value in the relationship is based on how much you can provide, rather than on who you are as a person. But here's the brutal truth. People don't respect what they don't have to work for. When you make yourself completely available, constantly giving and never expecting reciprocation, you become taken for granted. Not because the other person is evil, but because human beings naturally adapt to their environment. Think about it. If someone always says yes to your requests for help, you stop appreciating their help and start expecting it. If someone always prioritizes your needs over their own, you stop seeing them as an equal partner and start seeing them as a service provider. Real respect is built on reciprocity, on the understanding that both people are bringing value to the relationship and both people are invested in each other's well-being. When the giving is completely one-sided, the relationship becomes unbalanced, and imbalanced relationships cannot sustain respect or attraction over time. Now, I want to address something important. Giving is beautiful. Generosity is a wonderful quality. The problem isn't that you're a generous person. The problem is when your giving becomes compulsive, unbalanced, and motivated by fear rather than genuine abundance. Healthy giving comes from a full cup. You give because you want to, because you have plenty to share, because generosity brings you joy. Unhealthy giving comes from an empty cup. You give because you think you have to, because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't, because you're trying to earn love rather than express it. Here's how to tell the difference. Healthy giving feels good and energizes you. Unhealthy giving feels draining and leaves you resentful when it's not reciprocated. Healthy giving is occasional and intentional. Unhealthy giving is constant and compulsive. So how do you break this pattern? Start by doing a relationship audit. Track the flow of energy, attention, and care in your relationship for 1 week. Who initiates contact more often? Who offers help more frequently? Who makes sacrifices more regularly? If there's a significant imbalance, it's time to pull back and create space for reciprocity. This doesn't mean becoming cold or withholding. It means giving your partner the opportunity to step up and contribute. It means asking for what you need instead of hoping they'll intuitively provide it. It means saying no sometimes so that your yes becomes meaningful again. When you create balance in giving and receiving, you create the conditions for mutual respect. You show that you value yourself enough to expect reciprocity, and you give your partner the chance to be a true partner rather than just a recipient of your care. How to command respect, starting today. Now that we've identified these 7 respect-killing habits, let's talk about how to command respect starting today. Because respect isn't something you beg for with words. It's something you demonstrate through your actions, your energy, and your choices. The foundation of earning respect from others is respecting yourself. This means having clear boundaries and enforcing them consistently. It means prioritizing your own well-being alongside caring for others. It means maintaining your own identity, interests, and values regardless of who you're in a relationship with. Self-respect looks like saying, "That doesn't work for me," when someone crosses a boundary. It looks like maintaining your own social life, hobbies, and goals even when you're excited about a new relationship. It looks like having standards for how you want to be treated and not negotiating those standards out of fear or loneliness. Here's what I want you to understand. As a mature woman, you have incredible advantages in the respect department. You have life experience that has taught you what you will and won't tolerate. You have emotional wisdom that allows you to navigate conflicts with grace. You have self-knowledge that helps you communicate your needs clearly. You have the confidence that comes from having survived and thrived through decades of life. But these advantages only work if you use them. If you abandon your wisdom and experience to become someone you think will be more lovable, you're wasting your greatest assets. The most attractive quality you can possess isn't youth, perfect looks, or unlimited availability. It's the quiet confidence of a woman who knows her worth and expects to be treated accordingly. It's the grace of someone who can say no without apology and yes without resentment. It's the wisdom of someone who's learned that love without respect is not really love at all. Men are drawn to women who respect themselves because it gives them permission to relax and be authentic too. When you're secure in your worth, you don't need constant reassurance. When you have your own life, you don't need to control theirs. When you have clear boundaries, they know how to treat you properly. Here are 3 immediate actions you can take. First, identify one boundary you've been neglecting and recommit to it today. Maybe it's not accepting last-minute plans, or not tolerating disrespectful communication, or maintaining your weekly plans with friends regardless of what he wants to do. Second, reconnect with one aspect of your identity that you've neglected since entering this relationship. Maybe it's a hobby you used to love, a friend you haven't seen in months, or a personal goal you put on hold. Make plans to re-engage with that part of yourself this week. Third, practice receiving without immediately reciprocating. The next time someone offers to help you, to pay for something, or to do something nice for you, simply say thank you instead of immediately offering something in return. Learn to receive gracefully. It's a skill that will serve you well in creating balanced relationships. Remember, commanding respect isn't about being harsh, cold, or demanding. It's about being clear, consistent, and confident in your worth. It's about showing up as the complete, fascinating, valuable woman you are, instead of trying to become what you think someone else wants. Let's recap the 7 habits that silently erode respect in relationships. 1. Always putting his needs first, at your own expense. Remember, boundaries aren't barriers, they're bridges to mutual respect. 2. Seeking constant reassurance. Your worth doesn't depend on his constant validation. It depends on your own self-knowledge and confidence. 3. Overaccommodating. His lifestyle. Stay rooted in your own identity and invite him into your world instead of disappearing into his. 4. Tolerating poor behavior to keep the peace. Peace without respect isn't peace at all. It's just delayed conflict. 5. Downplaying.
your standards because you think you're too old to be picky.
Your age is an asset, not a liability, and your standards should reflect the wisdom you've gained. 6. Talking too much about past relationships. Focus on building something new instead of avoiding something old. 7. Giving more than you receive consistently. Create balance by allowing others to contribute to your life instead of doing all the emotional labor yourself. If you've recognized yourself in some of these patterns, please be gentle with yourself. You're not broken, weak, or flawed. You're human. These habits often develop as coping mechanisms or from cultural conditioning about how women should behave in relationships. The beautiful thing about habits is that they can be changed. Every moment is an opportunity to show up differently, to choose self-respect over people-pleasing, to choose authenticity over accommodation. Here's what I want you to remember. You don't need to change who you are. You just need to stop hiding who you are. You don't need to become perfect. You just need to become authentic. You don't need to earn respect through endless giving. You need to demonstrate that you already know you're worthy of it. The right man won't just tolerate your boundaries, standards, and authenticity. He'll be attracted to them. He'll respect you more for having them, not less. He'll see your self-respect as a sign of emotional health, not selfishness. Your homework for this week is simple. Choose one of these 7 habits to focus on. Just one. Notice when you start to fall into the old pattern and consciously choose a different response. It might feel uncomfortable at first. Change always does. But remember, temporary discomfort is the price of permanent transformation. You've lived too long and learned too much to settle for relationships that don't honor the incredible woman you've become. You deserve love that comes with respect, partnership that includes reciprocity, and relationships that celebrate your completeness rather than trying to change it. Don't chase anyone. Don't beg for respect. Don't shrink yourself to fit into spaces that weren't designed for your full magnificence. Instead, show up completely as yourself. Maintain your standards with grace and trust that the right person will not only meet you there, they'll be grateful to find someone who knows her own worth. If this video resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up. It helps more women find this message. Subscribe to this channel for more relationship wisdom, and most importantly, share this with any woman in your life who needs to hear that she is worthy of respect exactly as she is. In the comments below, I'd love to hear. Which of these 7 habits resonated most with you? What's one boundary you're committing to maintaining? Your story might inspire another woman to choose respect over people-pleasing. Remember, when you start showing up with self-respect, something incredible happens. The right men don't just notice, they rise to meet you, and that's where real love begins. Until next time, keep honoring the amazing woman you are.